Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of college basketball. We've made it to the end, the last conference, my conference, the Big Ten. If you've been following along with the channel this year, you've seen plenty of coverage of the Big Ten since we have recaps up on the channel against every team we're going to be talking about today. A lot of talent and quite a few team surprises as well.
Tim, this is your home. This is your house, your forte. You've watched a lot of Big Ten basketball this year and covered a lot of Big Ten basketball this year. So, like you said, we have recaps with Purdue and every single one of these teams that we're about to cover. So, if you want to see us go, well, Tim per se, I'm not in it. Tim's the Purdue guy. If you want to see Tim go more in depth about any one of these teams, you can go click on any one of the recaps about these teams. But I think we're ready to go. We're ready to rock and roll. Let's break down some Big Ten basketball, baby.
Without further ado, let's run it. We're starting off with one of the best teams in the country. Honestly, a little bit of a surprise that they're as elite as they are. They had a lot of moving pieces coming into this year that really have all turned out amazing for them. That'd be the Michigan Wolverines, led by Dusty May. They are an unbelievably deep, super talented team, and their height and positional versatility is their superpower by far. To be able to start 6'9" at the three, 6'9" at the four, and 7'3" as a center, with such a tough defender in Lendeborg at that three. It's just so hard to match up with. Very few teams have been able to challenge that. Offensively, they can score from pretty much anywhere. They have 8 players who average 7+ points per game, but that is now down to 7 with the Elson LJ Kayson, not Elson KJ, injury
Who?
with the ACL tear, which is tough to them because he is a significant role player for them, but they have so much depth that they really don't need to skip a beat even with losing him.
Yeah, that's the thing about Michigan. They're firmly in the echelon of the elites of the elites. You have your top five, Florida, UConn, Arizona, Duke, and then the last one there is Michigan. Not in any particular order, because I think the actual order would look a lot different than that. That's just me rolling off the top of my head. But yeah, that height and positional versatility is definitely unique, not just in the Big Ten, but in all of college basketball. That lineup is incredibly big, but they're incredibly versatile as well. So they can attack you from some very unique angles. Um, Laxel Yendeborg is the superstar of this team. Box score merchants hate him because he is firmly a first team All American and in that conversation. Although he doesn't necessarily have the prolific scoring numbers or rebounding numbers of some of the other first team All Americans, his impact on the floor is up there with the best of them. So whether you think he deserves it or not is, a matter of opinion. But there's no denying that he is an incredibly integral part of this Wolverines team.
For sure, and me personally, obviously, I have my feelings about him, and not they're not great because, of course, he's an opponent of me personally and my favorite team. But you cannot deny just how balanced of a player he is on both ends. He may not be one of those guys that averages 18 to 20 a game, but averaging 14, 7, 3, 1.2 steals, and 1.4 blocks, while shooting 50, 80, 32. I mean, he does it all. He does it everywhere. And you talk about, the fact that he averages 1.4. They have elite rim protection between their starting three, four, and five. Those guys average over 5 blocks per game just between the three of them. And it just goes to show about how elite their defense is. They're number 2 in the country right now. They just have athletes at pretty much every position. And the only things that have gotten them beat this season are unbelievably elite shot making by Wisconsin, and their loss at home, and then kind of dying from the three from their guards against Duke. That's the one thing that if those threes don't fall from the outside and their inside game isn't completely dominating, then they can have some issues, but there's a reason they only have 2 losses on the season. They are almost impenetrable,
Yeah, a lot of people are going to expect them to make a deep, deep run in this tournament.
and rightfully so. But their counterparts in the state of Michigan are up next with the Michigan State Spartans, led by coaching legend Tom Izzo. This is another Izzo classic roster. They're not necessarily full of superstars, but they really get the most out of their guys. And the evolution of guys like Jeremy Fears, Jackson Kohler, and Carson Cooper have made this team as great as they are, including the freak athlete that Cohen Carr is. The big thing for them is they have an incredibly sound defense. They just limit a lot. They're not necessarily one of those high pressure teams that causes tons of turnovers, but they make you uncomfortable. They have active hands and a lot of fundamental discipline that just kind of helps them throw other teams off.
Yeah, the thing about Tom Izzo's teams and this one especially is it's all about the team. The team, the team, the team. And I know I just upset both Michigan State and Michigan by saying that because that is a Bo Schembechler Michigan football thing, but it really does apply to the Spartans. No matter how good Michigan State is in the regular season, the thing about Tom Izzo's teams that I really love is they seem to step it up a notch in mid to late March, starting with the Big Ten tournament and especially carrying it over into the NCAA tournament. A lot of Michigan State teams that have previously flown under the radar have shown up in a big way in the NCAA tournament. And I expect this Michigan State team to be exactly the same. They're not flying under my radar. I expect big things out of them.
And that's completely understandable. And they've been playing some pretty great basketball lately. Their only kind of real downfall is their offense. They're just kind of up and down offensively, but they can really pop off if they can get meaningful contributions from some of their supporting cast, like Kerr Tang and Jordan Scott specifically from deep. If not, it's really just going to come down to how efficient and elite their sort of big four is between Fears, Kohler, Carr, and Cooper. Those guys are really what make the engine run on the offensive end. And if you're able to disrupt them, and especially disrupt the nation's leader in assists in Jeremy Fears Jr., that's kind of the way that you throw this Michigan State team off, offensively at least. But moving to the next team on the docket, you have got the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who have been a fantastic and fun surprise to watch this season. They started 20-0 going into February, but their second half schedule in the Big Ten has been very tough, and they unfortunately have shown that because they've dropped five out of their last 11, with two of those being unranked losses on the road at Iowa and UCLA.
Yeah, this ain't Keisei Tominaga's Nebraska ball. This version is bigger, better, faster, stronger, and a lot more fun. You don't get that way and start 20 and 0 without it being something real. Now, the slide that they've been on as of late, that's a different story. When their offense falters, they come back down to earth and you lose games like against Iowa and against UCLA, which, although they're tournament teams with the expectations forced upon them in the second half of the season, you'd expect those are games that Nebraska would take care of, especially down the stretch, especially on the road, where that's where it really matters. The best road teams tend to do well in these Big Ten tournaments and the NCAA tournament, and that's kind of what I'm looking at there.
Yeah, I mean it's a great point. Their offense is really where they kind of, fluctuate quite a bit. Even saw them have difficulty with Iowa today. Again, they won at home in overtime in that one. But in terms of their kind of personnel, Price Sanford is an elite leading scorer for them, shooting 40% from beyond the arc, but they really just have a very solid balance behind him. Rink Mast is a fantastic veteran who can light it up from three. If he's on, despite only being a 32% shooter from beyond the arc. If you really only look at his stats as a whole and don't look game by game, you really aren't going to truly understand what kind of offensive player he is. If they can get him on a roll, either in a game or just, on a stretch throughout the Big Ten tournament, NCAA tournament, you can see some big time performances out of their offense just because, of how unique is. But once again, they make their money on the defensive end. They are a top five defense in the country, and it kind of makes up for that not super efficient offense. But you got to like a team that defends well, doesn't turn the ball over much, and shoots pretty efficiently from the free throw line. That is always a pretty good recipe for any type of tournament setting.
I like it.
They're they're
Next.
they're a fun team to watch. Next up, you've got a very high flying, electric team to watch in the Illinois Fighting Illini, led by Brad Underwood. Keaton Wagler, a true freshman, has been the story of the Illini this year, from starting out as a relatively little known recruit, I believe a three-star, to a likely, very likely lottery pick. He's been both consistent as well as had nuclear performances. For the best offense in the country. They average 84 and a half points per game while being just 274th in tempo. It is You look at those numbers, it's hard to put into words how insane that is because you see a lot of teams average in mid 80s, high 80s, but those are the Alabamas, the I'm trying to think of some of those other SEC teams that we just talked about that were, both efficient on offense but just maximize the hell out of their possessions. This team is incredible in maximizing their efficiency because they don't just run and gun like them. At the end of the day, these Balkan boys are straight buckets. They can also defend pretty well too, which is what's kept them up in that kind of top 15, top 20 discussion in the country. They're borderline top 25 in defense, spearheaded by Kylan Boswell on that end. He's a great veteran point guard who defends the best guard on the other team game in and game out.
Yeah, I want to go back to the offense though.
Sure.
In a year when these teams at the top have been so much more efficient, historically efficient, you look at Illinois' offense and they're the most efficient offense in the country by so much more than we
They're the best
thought.
statistical offense in KenPom history. I don't know. I
Mhm.
don't have the numbers on me and how long KenPom has been doing his stats. They are the most efficient offense in the history of that database.
Yeah, and that's kind of wild to think about. But they have a lot of high volume shooters from three, and it's not just Keaton Wagler who can take over a game by himself if he needs to. You saw it personally in
Still have
Mackey.
nightmares.
Well, if Illinois' defense holds up and the offense can take care of business, who's to say that they won't make a deep, deep run into the tournament? But it's just that on any given day, you really don't know what you're going to get. College basketball's weird. You have those fun off games that can create some excitement, but Illinois is generally more on than they're off. So you can depend on them that way. Just what's going to happen if they get an off night.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason that they're a projected two seed. They have been that level of elite for the, majority of the season. I think realistically, when you look at losses, you kind of look at that loss at UCLA as the, I guess, most glaring, mainly because you gave up 95 points. Granted, it was in overtime, but also UCLA is just incredibly hard to play in Pauley Pavilion. But they're gonna be another pick for a lot of teams or for a lot of people in their Final Fours just because of how unbelievably high their ceiling is. If they can play consistently anywhere near their highest level, they can beat pretty much every team out there. But moving on to another team that has an unbelievably high ceiling, you've got the Wisconsin Badgers. Even just today, as of recording this, I'm in the aftermath of seeing just what that was this Wisconsin team can do. They are kind of like the perennial play up to their competition team. They've lost games at home against a really cascading USC team, at Indiana in overtime, at Ohio State and at Oregon, all just in the last 2 months. But they've also taken down number two Michigan, number eight Illinois, and Purdue all on the road, as well as Michigan State at home. It really, literally just all comes down to the three-point line for this team. They can outscore anybody when the threes are falling, and that's how they've beaten all of, the top four Big Ten giants. And that's the thing, Purdue can't even be considered a giant anymore at this point. That's why they've gotten the nickname the Giant Slayers, though. Going into a little bit of individual stats for this team, it's the only, deep dive in stats I'll go to. Across those four big time wins that they had, they averaged 46% from deep on really high volume threes and scored 90 plus in every game. But on the flip side, they can absolutely die by the three if it's not on for them. In those four bad losses against USC, Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, they averaged just 29% from three while still shooting that high volume. So it shows the volatility. If they're on, watch out, especially if they end up as this six seed. They could be, a mid seed that surprises a lot of people.
Yeah, big numbers guy, eh?
I'm a huge numbers guy. You know this.
So when I look at Wisconsin, I look at their schedule. They were on the wrong side of a lot of tough non-con games. They had some
Sure.
rough sledding there, and that would explain their 22-9 record. Because I think if they captured just a few of those games, they would be a higher seed, and their record would
You would
obviously
t you
look
would talk
a
about this team
lot
a lot
better.
differently.
Absolutely. So that's why they're kind of flying under the radar, just, looking on the surface. But like you said, they've been giant slayers, and playing those Big Ten elite teams very, very tough is exactly what you want to see, especially late in the season, because that's what it's going to take to win the Big Ten. And that's what it's
And on
going
the
to
road.
take. Yeah, that's what it's going to take to make a run in the tournament. If you play up to your competition, that's a very, very good sign that something special is brewing, especially if you catch fire over the next few weeks.
Sure. I mean, for them, now that the Big Ten tournament bracket's set, I mean, weirdly enough, the biggest question for them is can they get through the winner of USC and Washington? Because once again, it's those like Midland teams that they seem to struggle with more than they do
Yeah,
against the upper teams.
yeah, that. that high ceiling but also really low floor is kind of what has people, questioning
Sure.
Wisconsin. But
But
if
they're
the good
carrying
was,
some great momentum right now.
yeah,
That's what they need to
if
capitalize on.
if the good, hot shooting Wisconsin shows up, then it's going to be a very, very tough out for any opponent.
Sure, absolutely. And another team that you're looking for their best when they're best at their best, they can be very dangerous. It's the UCLA Bruins. I like calling Mick Cronin Mad Mick Cronin because man, that guy hates any reporter that wants to talk to him whatsoever. But both him and the Bruins have been up and down all season. They've gotten some statement wins at home to keep them in tournament contention, but they've just been kind of all over the place. We really thought they would be a little bit better than they are, or at least more consistent with the addition of Donovan Dent in the transfer portal, but he hasn't been quite as elite as we would have hoped. Instead, it's been Tyler Bilodeau doing much of the scoring punch, especially as a pick and pop big. They shoot great from three as a team with Bilodeau, Perry, and Clark all shooting 40% or above on decent volume, but they're certainly not that sort of high volume 3-point shooting team. Once again, if they play anywhere near their best consistently, they're a great team, but we haven't seen that consistency out of the Bruins this year.
Yeah, looking at UCLA, they don't really have any major road wins, which limits their ceiling, but they're
Man, they
relatively
love playing
hot.
in Pauley, though.
That's true. They're relatively hot
Undefeated.
as of late. They've won 5 of 6, including that win against Illinois and Nebraska. So it's not like they're totally unable to beat the Big Ten's best. They can go toe to toe on any given day. But whichever version of the UCLA offense shows up is going to tell a lot because they can hang offensively with a lot of the best, but defensively they're not really that great and they don't necessarily play a fast enough pace to make up for that either.
Sure, I think that's going to be the biggest thing for them. Their ceiling is entirely going to be based on what Donovan Dent shows up. When Donovan Dent is playing elite basketball, UCLA is a different team. You saw it in his play against Purdue when Purdue came to Pauley Pavilion. You saw it, even in their most recent game where they were able to take down USC on the road with 25 points out of him. But in those previous two games, he had 3 points and 4 points. It's like he is so unbelievably up and down. If he can be the superstar that they need him to be, that they know he can be in March, and we've even seen this a little bit in the past. It's a reason why he had so much hype coming into the season this year as a transfer. If that Donovan Dent shows up in March, UCLA could be scary as an 8 seed where they're projected right now. But once again, with so many of these teams and so much of the inconsistency we've seen, they could also be a first round out just like that.
Yeah, it's the Jekyll and Hyde with Donovan Dent. They'll go as he goes. But if you really want to talk about Jekyll and Hyde lately, it's kind of surprising that we haven't talked about Purdue yet. But here we are. This is a Purdue channel. Tim, you have talked extensively, the good, the bad, and the ugly at times, which
There's
it
been a lot
certainly
of
has
ugly.
been, well, especially lately. So we know what they're made of. We've gone through the roster. Tim, you've had your various points, so it's not like we need to go through any more of that when it comes to this Purdue team. I look at their past few seasons, the disappointment early and the disappointment when they go late, right? Being on the doorstep of that national championship. There's a lot of pessimism in the fan base right now, or at least that's what I'm seeing on social media.
Sure.
Right, they've lost their last 4 of 6. They need a good showing in the Big Ten tournament because you need to get right. But they opened the season number one in the country for a reason, and they started 17-1. So there is that high upside in there, and there always will be with a Matt Painter team with a point guard as dynamic as Braden Smith, with guys like TKR manning the blocks. But what's going to make this team different? What is going to get them over the hump to bring the national championship trophy to West Lafayette? Because that should be the ultimate goal. And it has been for the last few seasons. And it's about time that it darn well happens. Why not this year? Tell me why.
The biggest difference maker and what I've been kind of sitting and stewing on with this team is, quite frankly, it's the chip on their shoulder. They came into this year with all the expectations of the world, both from the media and from themselves. If you paid attention to Big Ten Media Day, these guys were the ones not shying away from the talk, from the conversation point of we came back to this team this year to win a national championship. Now they've faced the pressure of that all year long. And you can tell how it's worn on them within these last, 2 months, with, the stretches of losses, the stretches of poor play, and how a portion, however small or big it may be, how the portion of the fan base has kind of turned on them and gotten very frustrated. And I think there's a lot of parts about that that are reasonable, but there's a reason why these guys, are the players that they are and why we had the expectations that we did. That being said, I would like to put a different spin on this Purdue roster and this Purdue team going into the NCAA tournament. Let's think back to 2019. That Carson
Uh,
Edwards led Purdue team
I was gonna
was,
say, do we have to? That was such a long time ago. I
but
don't want to do
but
that.
hear me out here.
Oh,
That
okay.
Carson Edwards led Purdue team was one shot, one rebound away from a Final Four. Going into that NCAA tournament, no one thought this team is a shoe-in for a deep run. They had the talent, but no one thought they were a shoe-in. They weren't particularly elite on defense. They were in the 30s defensive efficiency as well. But it took inspired play from their star player or players, with him and with Carson Edwards and Ryan Klein, um, to just push that barrier, to push that ceiling. That's, I think, the mentality and the thought process that this Purdue team needs to have and that they can have to switch up the narrative going into this tournament. They are no longer the top dog. They're no longer throw preseason number one out of the window. You're not that team anymore. You are a team that now needs to have that chip on your shoulder as an underdog that everyone is so unbelievably out on right now. But you know that they have all the talent in the world. They know in that locker room that they can erupt for 90 plus on any given game. You can have 20 plus from any number of Smith, Lawyer, Cox, TKR, even guys off the bench. It's that chip on your shoulder that's going to make the difference. That's going to, elevate them to have the possibility to make a deep run in this tournament. Nothing is given, nothing is, guaranteed. But if they have that chip on their shoulder, they can be that team that shocks the world almost like they did in 2019.
Oof. Oof. Chills. Can we get that to the locker room in West Lafayette? Because I think I'm about ready to run through a
Wire
brick
me
wall.
in.
But there is something to be said about being the underdog because a lot of people are incredibly out on this Boilermaker team. And whether the reasons are valid or not, that's just the national perception around them right now. So having that chip on your shoulder, going and proving not just to college basketball, but yourselves that, you are that team that can go and make something special happen. I mean that's what it's going to take. And when the bracket comes out, Tim, you'll go much more in depth about specifically what Purdue needs to do against each of the opponents that they may potentially face in the Purdue's Path to the Final Four video. Another rendition of that will be coming soon. But for now, it's which team are you going to be? Who are you going to decide to be? It's put up or shut up. It's now or never.
Abs Absolutely. Realistically, um, the main questions that I have for Purdue is first on a large scale, it's the defense. What version of that's going to come out? What are you going to be able to do matching up wise to whatever team is in front of you on any given game? But secondly, it comes down to the front court. I have three main questions for that front court. Can you get TKR going early rather than just in the second half? We've seen so much second half TKR takeovers or just massive elevations in his level of play. Secondly, can you keep Clough and TKR out of foul trouble? And that comes down to their, defensive scheme and how they choose to play defense. Will they stick with this hard hedge that really isn't working for them? And third, can you get those two to rebound against the bigger, more athletic teams? That's what it's going to take to make a deep run facing, these better competitions, whether it's Big Ten tournament play or NCAA tournament play. That's what it's going to take. So there's going to be a lot of that you're going to get from the guards and what they can do. But this front court is going to have to lead us to the promised land if we're going to be able to make a deep run.
Yeah, the guards you're not necessarily worried about. It is the forwards and the center play. Um, And the thing about Purdue is they're going to need to find that net neutral lineup because they don't have that right now. It's either
Shorten the rotation. Sorry.
well, dude, this isn't a KOT4Q video. It's like you can't just go 5 man rotation once you get into the tournament and have anybody play 40 minutes a game.
It
Although
doesn't need to
I'm
be five, just needs to be seven.
but that's true. You got to get your net positive lineups on the floor as much as possible. And even if that means, having a few extra guys play a few extra minutes, which they're not used to, if you're not going to empty out the tank, then you're never going to empty out the tank. Like
Why rest
this
your
is the
guys throughout the
time that you do
season
it.
to not play them now? You rest your stars playing them 30 to 35 minutes or even less throughout the season for them to be healthy and in their best shape right now.
It,
Use them.
it's not like Painter's never done it. We've seen their stars play 38, 39, 40 minutes a game in the NCAA tournament. If it's got to start a little bit early to get the guys on a roll and to get the team some
Now's as good
momentum,
of a
and
time as any.
you might as well. You might as well. When there is no tomorrow, how are you going to act today? And I think that's what it is for this Purdue team. And we got about 7 minutes left. So we got Ohio State, Iowa, and Indiana. I'm sure you'd love to talk about Purdue forever, but
Nope, I'm ready to move on right now.
Yep. Okay, let's go.
But moving on to a team that has had Purdue's number in recent years, it's the Ohio State Buckeyes, led by Purdue's worst nightmare, Jake Diebler, of all
Dude, you got to
people.
stop going to those games.
I got to stop going to games, period, I guess.
No,
But
just
if
that
Ohio State
matchup
could,
in particular.
literally, if Ohio State could play Purdue every game, they'd be elite, but they don't. But the Buckeyes are led by Bruce Thornton, who is one of the few seniors to play all 4 years with their team, and he has been incredible yet again this year, a massive part of the reason why they are on the right side of the bubble going into the tournament. But a huge help for them, or and for him specifically, is having a running mate like John Mobley Jr. He's an elite shooter. He's shooting 42.4% on 210 attempts.
That's a lot.
And those two guys are similar to a Wisconsin with Nick Boyd and John Blackwell. Those two at the guard spots are going to be huge for them in terms of being a constant, floor raiser for the Buckeyes in the NCAA tournament. The biggest questions for them just come down to defense and rebounding. Didn't look like an issue against Purdue, but on average, they don't stop the ball particularly well, give up a lot of open shots, and they only averaged 33.7 rebounds per game because they just don't have a ton of size or anybody in their front court that's really has a knack for rebounding.
Well, this is a great time to rip off three in a row, including that win against the Boilermakers and the Hoosiers, which killed their bubble chances. More on that later. So that gives them some much needed momentum into the Big Ten tournament. So they're a team on the rise. What you can't say the same for is the Iowa Hawkeyes. They are a team that is seemingly in free fall. They lost their last 6 of 8, including at Maryland and at Penn State, who are both not going to make the tournament. So not great. They were relatively safe, but now they're not a lock. And looking at that strength of schedule, yeah, they're playing a Big Ten schedule, but I look at the statement wins and they got one, and that's against Nebraska at home. So you're going to need a win or two to really punch your ticket and, not be stressing on Selection Sunday.
Sure, and even in that statement when they only put up 57 points, it's just the fact that Nebraska had a worse game on offense. And the problem for that and the problem for the Hawkeyes is the fact that it's really just Bennett Sturts and crew. There's no particular like second, third option that you really have any consistency out of. And you've seen that time and time again where it's just kind of whoever steps up is great, but sometimes it's a little bit of almost nobody, and that puts them in really scary issues. This team is completely different if the supporting cast shows up, so never count out a Ben McCollum team led by Bennett Sturts. But the thing for them is they just play so unbelievably slow, like unbelievably slow. They're 360th in tempo, which is like bottom 10, I think, in the entire country.
Yeah, it might be bottom
So
five.
I think it might even be bottom five. So if they don't have the shots falling, you could see them in that 50, 60 point range really easily.
This is not your Fran McCaffrey's Iowa Hawkeyes. This is something completely different. And I know Iowa fans are going to use that as like, okay, new coach, first year, springboard, then the sky's the limit the next year. But it's we're here now. So this is what you got.
Yeah, exactly. They gotta work with what they've got now to see if they can, make some noise heading into the both tournaments right now. But speaking of needs to make a lot of noise, it's the Indiana Hoosiers. This team has been incredibly up and down. They were 12-3 to start the season, followed by a four-game losing streak, then a three-game winning streak capped by the home rivalry win against Purdue, and then starting in mid-February, losing another four straight games. They have the talent, especially led by a guy like Lamar Wilkerson, scoring over 20 a game. And Tucker DeVries has been pretty solid as well. Just kind of interesting, just kind of how he's fit into this team. Weirdly enough, their big strength is free throw shooting, but that won't win you games if you can't keep close games. And that's been a problem for them. They're not good at rebounding. They're not great offensively or defensively. And they just don't have the size down low to compete in the Big Ten compared to a lot of these teams in, the upper half.
Free throw shooting. Oh boy. Oh, you're funny. Well, they've lost five of their last six, and their at-large chances, which were very real, are now spiraling, and so much so that they are right on that line. They are Lenardi's first team out. So if they are a one and done, I don't see
Yeah.
them getting in, which is going to suck considering where they were at to start the season. I think they'd need at least a few quality Big Ten tournament wins to safely get on the right side of the bubble. Either way, I think the Hoosiers are going to be stressing.
I think realistically the number for them is three. Given the position they're in, if they manage to get three Big Ten tournament wins, because the problem is if you win your first matchup against either Penn State or Northwestern, eh. If you beat Purdue, that's solid, but also not great considering the basketball Purdue's been playing lately.
That's a good
You need to
point.
get that extra win against Nebraska for you to really feel good going into Selection Sunday.
Unless you really, really kill one of those two teams.
Sure. Yeah, if you just look that dominant, great. But yeah, they still have a lot of work to be done if they want to feel comfortable on Selection
Yeah.
Sunday.
So speaking of that Big Ten tournament, oh boy, I wonder who Tim is picking. Let's guess everybody who's made it to this far in the video.
I mean, here's the thing. There's a lot of great teams in this conference. I go back to that chip on Purdue's shoulder. I believe in them to be able to turn things around in the sake of it's literally now or never. It was now or never on senior night, and the thing that let them down was defense. Well, it's now or never in terms of your last games in a Purdue uniform. Realistically, the big thing is I like Purdue's path to the Big Ten championship game or potential path because getting the winner of Penn State, Northwestern, or Indiana obviously poses a pretty solid matchup. Then facing Nebraska, a team you've beat already and also isn't great on the boards, not fantastic offensively all the time. And then if they are able to get past that game, you get most likely Michigan State, a team you've played closely, also isn't great from three, which once again is Purdue's biggest kryptonite defensively. That gives you your best chance of even just making it into the Big Ten title game, and just let the other half of the bracket play out and see what happens in the title game. Not going to say it's super likely, but in terms of a path, this is about the best path Purdue could get from the position they're in.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be tough for them, especially considering they have to play an extra game since they missed out on that double bye.
Sure.
But we saw it coming from a mile away. You were picking Purdue. This was pretty set in stone here.
Honestly, I almost don't hate a potential extra tune-up game for Purdue though, in terms of trying to get a momentum win facing a potentially worse team. Now, if
Yeah,
it's against Indiana,
it all
oh boy,
depends on
that's
who
going to
you
be an
get.
interesting one.
It all depends on how the
A
bracket
rivalry Big Ten
goes.
tournament game would go crazy.
Yeah. So I'm taking a different route. Stunner.
Understandably.
Um, I like the team aspect. I think the best teams generally win out. And especially since I stated how Michigan State tends to elevate their play this late in the season, I'm picking the Spartans. I like how they play together. No one guy is greater than the team. And especially if you look how the bracket might unfold, they get either UCLA, Minnesota, or Rutgers. And those should be no sweat for the Spartans. It's when you get to those other double bye teams, such as Michigan, Illinois, and Nebraska, how are you going to compete? And I have all the faith in the world, especially against Illinois and Nebraska, that the Spartans can beat those teams. It's just Michigan, but they lost twice. So if you get that game three and it's potentially for the Big Ten championship, that raises the stakes significantly. And then everything that you've done in those previous two games kind of goes out the window. So I like him. I like Izzo to get the job done here.
They're another one that has a very favorable path because in terms of their matchup, whether it's Purdue or Nebraska or somebody else in that semifinal game, assuming they're able to get past the likes of Rutgers, Minnesota, or UCLA, Michigan State's an elite rebounding team, which would bode well against Nebraska and would bode pretty well against Purdue. Obviously, they've beat Purdue already. So again, that would then come down to all the marbles, one game, Big Ten championship game, whether it's Michigan, whether it's somebody else. You got to trust Izzo in March and how he has this team playing right now because they just gave Michigan a good run for their money. In Ann Arbor just the other day. So I can completely understand that pick. They're a great team and they've got a pretty favorable run to the championship as well.
Spartan fans, you're welcome.
Exactly. But that rounds out not just the Big Ten, but the entirety of our conference breakdowns for this year. It's been a blast. It's been fun to go through all of these conferences and also just be recording videos with you again. But we have so much more ahead of us. That may be all we've got for today, but these conference tournaments will be underway before you know it. Please let us know your thoughts about this Big Ten tournament specifically and who might make some unexpected noise. But stay tuned for more Purdue recaps to come as this season comes to a close and the Path to the Final Four video that Drew mentioned. And of course, some super fun previews and predictions all tournament long. But if you want more from us, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, we're out.